The CEO collapsed in the boardroom. Then he heard the secretary whisper, "Please, don't leave me." The CEO collapsed in the middle of the boardroom. 1 second he was leading the meeting with quiet authority. The next he was on the floor, unconscious, silent, and surrounded by people who didn't know what to do. But one person moved, not an executive, not a doctor, his secretary. And what happened next silenced the entire room. Because the moment she stepped forward, the power in that building shifted, and so did everything they thought they knew about her. No one expected her to react the way she did, and no one was ready for why. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. The boardroom always smelled the same: steel, overbrewed coffee, and pressure that settled in your bones. Adrian Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood & Co., stood at the center of it all. 34, unreadable. Precise, like a man carved out of marble and deadlines. He moved through numbers like they were a language only he could speak, his voice sharp and measured. And if we close the Singapore deal by Q4, The pen slipped from his fingers. At first, no one reacted. It seemed like nothing. But then his jaw tensed, his breath hitched, and his gaze lost its usual piercing focus. His shoulders hunched for a second too long, and then he collapsed. The sound of his body hitting the floor snapped the room out of its trance. Chairs scraped, papers rustled, someone let out a sharp gasp. A director's voice cracked, "Adrian!" But what came next wasn't shock or protocol. It was a whisper. "Please, don't leave me." A single, trembling voice from the far end of the room. Lily Parker. She was already on her knees beside him, one hand cupping his cheek, the other grasping for his pulse. In her emerald green dress and simple black blazer, she looked heartbreakingly out of place amidst the $1,000 suits. But her hands were steady, her eyes full of something none of them could name. "Stay with me, Adrian," she murmured, pressing her forehead against his temple for the briefest moment. "Don't do this. Not now. Not here." And it wasn't the fact that she was crying that froze the room. It was the way she said his name. Adrian, not Mr. Blackwood, not Sir. Like she'd said it before. Like she knew him in a way none of them did. It was the kind of familiarity that left the room pulsing with questions no one dared ask out loud. The murmurs started immediately. Did she just... Wait, what's going on between them? She said it like they were... Nobody finished their sentences. They were too busy watching Lily refuse to let go of his hand as the paramedics arrived. A paramedic hesitated, then waved her in. "Next of kin?" "Assistant," she said. "Close enough." Not even his brother, Ethan Blackwood, who entered just as the stretcher disappeared down the hall, and caught the final look on Lily's face before the elevator doors closed. Earlier that morning, Lily Parker didn't want to go to work. She stood in front of her tiny bathroom mirror, brushing the same auburn wave away from her face for the third time. Her makeup sat untouched on the counter. A half-full coffee mug grew cold beside the sink. She reached for the photo frame tucked behind her perfume bottle, an old picture of her mother laughing. Arms stretched wide in Central Park. Tucked behind it was a note she hadn't looked at in months. 4 handwritten words on soft cream paper. "I believe in you, A.B." She traced the letters slowly, letting the corners of her mouth twitch into a tired smile. She told herself not to think about him today. Not the way he looked when no one else was watching. Not the kindness that slipped out when he thought no one noticed. Not the fact that his words had once pulled her out of a hole she didn't know she was in. She folded the note and tucked it back, just like always. Some stories had a clear ending. At least, that's what she tried to believe. By 8:15 a.m., Lily was at her desk outside Adrian's office, typing meeting notes while sipping coffee that tasted faintly of burnt styrofoam. The office machine had been broken for a week. The irony of a billion-dollar company running on vending machine coffee wasn't lost on her. Greg from HR strolled past and dropped a donut on her desk. "Jelly-filled, no powdered sugar. You hate the mess." Lily smiled. "You remembered." "I pay attention." He winked and walked off, only to trip over his own shoelace for the second time that week. His badge had pinged twice on weekends, always with the same excuse. "Forgot my charger," he'd grin. Her laugh was soft and genuine, just enough to catch Adrian's attention as he stepped off the elevator. He paused. Her hair fell in soft waves down her back. She wore those simple pearl earrings again, the ones he noticed but never mentioned. She looked warm. Capable, out of place in a world this sharp-edged. And for just a moment he didn't move. Then she turned and noticed him. Her posture straightened instantly. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "all business. Your 8:30 with Singapore is confirmed. I printed the updated projections. And your schedule is—" He held up a small paper bag. She blinked. "What's that?" "Decent coffee," he said, "and a lemon muffin from Morning Finch." Her brows lifted in surprise. "You went to Morning Finch? You hate that place." "I don't hate it," he replied, setting the bag gently on her desk. "Just dislike birds." She laughed again, that unfiltered sound he heard too rarely. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer. "You're welcome." Neither moved. For a moment too long they just stood there, silence thick with something neither of them acknowledged. Then he cleared his throat and walked into his office. At 9:07 a.m., his voice came through the intercom. "Lily, can you come in for a minute?" She entered. Notepad in hand, her heels clicking quietly on the floor. His office had a panoramic view of the city, but today he wasn't looking at it. He stood with his back to the window, hands in his pockets. "I need you to stay for the board meeting this morning," he said without turning. She blinked. "You want me in the room?" "I want you there," he repeated. And then he finally looked at her. Something in his gaze unsettled her. Not cold, not warm, just knowing. She nodded, unsure what she'd just agreed to. Because what neither of them knew, what no one in that building knew, was that by the end of that meeting he would be fighting for his life. And she would be revealing more than anyone was ready to hear. Doyi hospitals always smelled like cleaning solution and memory. Lily sat in the corner of Adrian's private room, legs tucked under her chair, hands cradling a styrofoam cup of tea she hadn't touched. Outside, New York pulsed like a living thing, impatient, loud, alive. Inside, everything was still. The monitors hummed softly. Adrian's chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, his face pale but calm now, stripped of all that usual intensity. Without his suit, without the room full of executives hanging on his every word, he looked almost young, vulnerable. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 6:42 p.m. He'd been in and out for a few hours, finally stabilizing. Lily hadn't moved much. She'd answered the doctor's questions, nodded at the nurse who offered her a blanket, and politely ignored every message from work that buzzed through her phone. Most were from the comms team, a few from HR. But the last one, just a few minutes ago, was from Ethan Blackwood. "We need to talk. Conference room, B, 7 p.m. She sighed, stood slowly, and smoothed her dress. Adrian stirred. Her heart jumped. She turned so quickly she nearly dropped the tea. His fingers twitched, and a sound left his lips. Not quite a word. Just a breath. She leaned forward. "Adrian," she whispered, voice cracking. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. His brow creased, just slightly, like something inside him was fighting to surface. She reached for his hand, brushed her thumb across his knuckles. The gesture felt too intimate, too fragile, too necessary. "I'm right here," she murmured. "I'm not going anywhere." The hallway outside the conference room felt colder than it should have. Lily adjusted her blazer and pushed the door open quietly. Ethan Blackwood stood near the window, back rigid, arms crossed. He looked nothing like his brother, taller. Yes, but colder, sharper, as if warmth was a luxury he couldn't afford. He didn't look at her as she entered. "You've been here all day," he said. "I wasn't going to leave him alone," she replied softly. "No, I don't imagine you would." He turned, eyes narrow. "But tell me, Miss Parker, why were you the only one he called by name before collapsing?" She froze. "Is that what this is about?" Ethan stepped closer, gaze hard. "There are rumors, board members talking. You think they didn't notice the way you ran to him like I cared?" she snapped before she could stop herself. "Because I did. He studied her for a beat too long. Are you two involved?" Her stomach twisted. "It's not like that. But it was something. He didn't ask. He already knew." She swallowed hard. "He helped me, once. A long time ago he didn't have to, but he did." Ethan's voice lowered. "And you think that gives you a seat beside his hospital bed?" "No," she whispered. "I don't think I have any seat. I wasn't supposed to matter. But I do, and maybe that scares you." The silence that followed was thick with something unspoken, the weight of old grudges and maybe something else. He stepped back, just a bit. "Don't make this messy," he said. "Adrian has a reputation to protect." "So do I," Lily replied, chin lifting slightly. "And you'd be surprised how well I've done it." She didn't return to the hospital room until after 9. A nurse passed her a covered tray on the way in. "I asked the kitchen to send something for you. He hasn't woken up yet." "You should eat." Lily offered a tired smile and nodded. "Ellen." She set the tray on the small table near the window. Grilled cheese, tomato soup, and a chocolate chip cookie. A humble meal, but one that tugged at something soft inside her. She carried the soup to the chair by the bed, curling into it like a child who had nowhere else to be. "I used to bring you soup like this," she said quietly. More to herself than him. "Last winter, when you were working through that flu and refused to take a sick day." Her lips twitched. "You made me eat the cookie because you said I looked too pale. I thought you were overstepping, and then I realized no one else had said anything." She took a small bite of the grilled cheese, chewed slowly. "I know I'm just your secretary," she continued, "but you never treated me like just anything." Her voice wavered. "And I don't know if I'll ever get to tell you what that meant." She set the plate down and reached into her purse. Carefully, she unfolded the soft, worn note she kept hidden behind the photo frame. "I brought this with me today, just in case." She laid it gently on the bedside table, beside the untouched tray of hospital water. "I believe in you. A.B." It looked smaller now, but no less important. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Greg. "Hey, everything okay? You disappeared." "People are asking, want me to cover for you again?" She smiled faintly and typed back, "Thanks, I'll let you know." A second later. "Also, you left your umbrella. It's raining like mad." Lily sighed, looking out the window at the storm that had crept in unnoticed. She turned back to Adrian just in time to see his hand twitch again. And then, slowly, his eyes opened. Her breath caught. "Adrian," she said, barely above a whisper, already reaching for his hand. He blinked, confused, lips parting as if waking from a nightmare. She leaned in closer, her fingers tightening around his. "I'm here," she said gently. "It's okay. You're safe." He looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to remember where or who he was. Then, his voice cracked. I never sent that message." Lily froze. "What message?" His eyes fluttered closed briefly before he opened them again, voice hoarse and dry. "The board. I didn't call that meeting. Someone else changed it." His words barely left his lips, but they hung in the air like smoke, quiet, unsettling, impossible to ignore. And Lily, still holding his hand, realized she had just stepped into something far bigger than a collapsed CEO and a hidden past. Rain slid down the windows like it had nowhere better to be. Lily stayed close to Adrian's side, her hand still resting lightly over his. The beeping of the monitors was steady again, but the tension hadn't eased. Not after what he'd said. "The meeting," she murmured. "Someone changed it?" Adrian's eyes opened again, slower this time, more aware. He winced, his hand instinctively lifting to the side of his head. "They said it was urgent, Singapore, but I never called it." He took a shaky breath. "It wasn't on my schedule until this morning." Lily's stomach sank. "I printed your calendar, first thing. I double-checked it before the directors came in." He met her gaze. "Then you didn't add it either?" "No." She sat back slightly, brows furrowing. "Only you and I have access to the internal calendar. Unless someone from IT," Adrian cut in, his voice low. "Because she used your phone, it registered as you. Our Lily plus Adrian only rule still holds on paper." His head shook. Just enough to silence her. "Don't say it out loud. Not here." Her heart pounded. She didn't want to believe it. Not the possibility that someone inside had manipulated the CEO's schedule and somehow timed it with a medical emergency. But the fear in his eyes wasn't about his health. It was about something or someone else. He reached for the cup of water at his bedside. She helped him lift it, her fingers brushing his. "I'm sorry," he said, once he'd taken a sip, "for dragging you into this." "You didn't drag me," she replied gently. "I walked in, eyes wide open." He gave a faint, tired smile. "That's always been the problem, hasn't it? You see everything." An hour later, a doctor with salt and pepper hair and a clipboard arrived. He asked Lily to step out briefly while he examined Adrian, and she agreed, though she didn't want to. She wandered to the hospital cafe downstairs, her coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The rain hadn't let up. Outside, cars splashed past and umbrellas bobbed like drifting leaves. Inside, the air smelled like burnt toast and instant coffee. She sat by the window with a bowl of soup and a small plate of saltine crackers. Chicken noodle. Again. Third time this week. Greg would have teased her for it. She smiled at the thought, then checked her phone. No new messages from Ethan. HR had gone quiet, too. The silence was unnerving. She reached into her bag and pulled out a napkin, a clean one, and started folding it into the familiar shape of a small paper crane. Her fingers moved without thinking. Out. She used to fold them every time she felt powerless. Back when she was a nobody, when the only thing she owned was debt and an unreliable coat, and she'd walk home in the rain, pretending it didn't bother her. She placed the crane on the tray next to her bowl and watched it sit quietly, wings spread just enough to suggest flight. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. She turned. "Didn't peg you for origami," said a voice she hadn't heard in months. Catherine Wren. Tall, polished, breathtaking in the way that women in glossy magazines are, all tailored lines and smooth confidence. She wore a beige trench coat, not a drop of water on her. Perfect, as always. And once, a long time ago, she had been Adrian's girlfriend, or something dangerously close to it. Lily straightened. "Didn't peg you for hospital cafeterias." Catherine smiled all teeth. "I heard what happened." She slid into the chair across from Lily without asking. "Poor Adrian. You must be devastated." "I'm managing." You always were the strong, silent type, loyal to a fault. It's admirable." Lily bristled. "What do you want, Catherine?" "Oh, don't be so tense." Her voice dropped to something silkier. "I just wanted to check in. After all, this company doesn't run itself. And if Adrian's out of commission..." Lily blinked. "Are you even still with the company?" Catherine smiled wider. "You'd be surprised how many people return when things get interesting." There it was, that glint behind her eyes, like she already knew something Lily didn't, like she was waiting for a reaction. "You're wasting your time," Lily said quietly. Catherine leaned forward. "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, you're still just the secretary. And you might want to be careful with the way people see you now. You don't know who's watching." Lily held her gaze, unflinching. Then, calmly, she stood and took her tray to the bin. She left the paper crane on the table. As she walked away, she didn't look back. Adrian was sitting up when she returned, not fully, but more than before. Alert, eyes clearer. "You were gone a while," he said. "I ran into a ghost." He tilted his head. "Catherine?" His lips tightened. "Of course. She knows something." "I'm not surprised." Lily walked over and sat down beside him. She looked at his hand, still pale against the blanket. "There's something you should know," she said, "before this gets any worse." He turned his head slowly. "What?" She hesitated. For the first time that day. "I think this might have started before today," she said, voice low. "A few weeks ago, you missed a meeting I never scheduled. You were furious. I thought I'd messed up. But when I checked the system, it had been manually edited. Backdated. I couldn't trace it." His brows drew together. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to sound paranoid, or worse, jealous." His expression softened. "Of who?" She smiled without humor. "Of all the people with clearance you used to trust more than me." The silence that followed felt more personal than professional. And then, without meaning to, her fingers brushed the back of his hand again. He didn't pull away. His voice dropped. "Do you really think someone inside is trying to hurt me?" She looked at him for a long moment. "I think someone's trying to remove you." And when she said it, something in his eyes shifted. Not surprise exactly, but a kind of grim realization. Like a piece he hadn't wanted to acknowledge finally fell into place. He looked down for a second, then slowly lifted the blanket off his lap and reached beneath the hospital tray. "Then it's time I show you something." There was a quiet moment, the kind that only happens when two people realize something unspoken had just become real. Adrian's hand slipped beneath the hospital tray. He moved slowly, still weak but determined. Lily watched as he pulled out a slim, black leather folder, not a hospital document, not a company file, something personal. She leaned forward. "You had that with you?" He nodded. "Always keep it close. Ever since Zurich." "Zurich?" His lips quirked faintly. "Long story, one that ends with a burned briefcase, a press leak, and a $12 million apology." He passed her the folder. Lily took it gently and opened the flap. Inside was a single object, a key, silver, worn around the edges, old, not corporate, and beneath it, a folded envelope with no writing on the front, just a small red wax seal. Her hands hesitated. "What is this?" "It's not for now," Adrian said, "but you'll know when to open it." She looked at him, confused. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I trust you," he said simply, "and because there might come a moment soon when you're standing in a room full of people who don't. You'll need something they don't expect." Lily held the key in her palm, feeling the cold metal against her skin. She looked back at Adrian and saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. Not power, not pride. Something more raw, fear, but also resolve. "Is it something dangerous?" she asked softly. "No," he said after a long pause, "but it's the kind of truth that doesn't come back once it's out." Back at her apartment that night, Lily set the key and envelope on her bedside table and sat down with a sigh. The rain had stopped, but the city still sounded restless. Sirens in the distance, horns, the buzz of late-night life carrying up through the windows. She wrapped herself in an old cardigan, made tea, and collapsed onto the worn couch in her living room. The apartment was small but warm. Every item had been chosen carefully. The faded armchair from her grandmother, the second-hand bookshelf full of her mother's novels, the delicate lamp with the chipped base that she couldn't bring herself to replace. And on the wall, right above the bookshelf, was a photo, the only one she had of herself and Adrian. It wasn't posed. It had been taken accidentally during last year's holiday party. They were mid-laugh, someone had said something ridiculous, and she'd just touched his arm. His eyes were on her in the photo, not in that intense, calculating way he used in meetings. He looked soft, like he'd finally taken a breath. Lily hadn't meant to keep the photo, but after everything that happened between them, the closeness, the silence that followed, it became a reminder of what almost was, and maybe what still could be. But tonight it felt different, like something was shifting in the air around them again. The next morning, the office was quieter than usual. Lily stepped off the elevator into a space that buzzed not with activity, but with suspicion. People looked up from their desks as she walked by. Some nodded politely, others simply stared. Someone whispered as she passed. A printer jammed and cursed under its breath. She forced a smile and kept walking. Greg caught up to her halfway to Adrian's office, holding a half-eaten croissant and a look of concern. "Hey, you okay?" she nodded. "Yeah, I just needed a long night." "I figured." He walked beside her for a few more steps. There's a lot of talk about what happened, the board's in knots. Ethan's apparently running point until Adrian's back. Lily glanced sideways. "And Catherine?" Greg's face tightened. "Back like a ghost. I don't trust her. Neither should you." She smiled. "I never did." He handed her a coffee, not from the machine, real, still warm. "Thanks, Greg." "Don't let them rattle you," he said, voice quieter now. "People forget. Secretaries are the ones who know where all the bones are buried." She watched him walk away and thought about how many times she'd dismissed kindness like that. How easy it was to ignore loyalty when you're busy surviving. Inside Adrian's office, she closed the door behind her and took a deep breath. The desk was untouched, the windows open to the skyline, but on the desk, right in the center, was a small white envelope. No seal, just her name. She picked it up. "G?" Hesitating for a heartbeat before opening it. Inside was a printed email from Adrian. Except it wasn't. The tone was wrong, cold, formal, and signed with a digital signature he never used. The timestamp showed it had been sent to the board the day before, scheduling the emergency meeting. She read it twice, then a third time. And as the pieces began to fit together, her stomach turned, because she knew how Adrian wrote. Every comma, every phrasing, every word he never said. This wasn't him. But someone had gone to great lengths to make it seem like it was. And whoever it was, they had access to everything. Ooh. Her access, his tone, the inner circle's rhythm. Lily folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her purse. She stood still for a long moment, staring out at the skyline, and slowly reached for the key she had left in her coat pocket. The metal felt heavier than it had last night, because now she understood. This wasn't just about a fake meeting, it was about replacing Adrian entirely, and someone had just made their first real move. The elevator doors opened directly into the executive parking level. Lily's heels clicked softly against the concrete as she walked toward Adrian's private car, the only one left untouched that week. The dark sedan waited, sleek and silent, like it had a memory of everything said inside it. The valet had handed her the keys without question. Mr. Blackwood made arrangements, said you'd know what to do. She wasn't sure she did. Still, she slid into the driver's seat, placed her purse on the passenger side, and exhaled slowly. She hadn't driven this car since that night nearly a year ago. The charity gala in Tribeca, the silent ride back uptown, the argument in the parking garage. He'd said something she wasn't ready to hear. She had left the car with her hands shaking and her heart breaking quietly inside her coat pocket. But today felt different. She tapped the center console. A code lock blinked to life. 4 digits. She stared at it for a second before typing in a date. Suffolk, April 9th. The day he gave her the note. The console clicked open with a soft whir. Inside, neatly stacked beneath a leather case, were 3 flash drives, a slim black notebook, and a small velvet box. She reached for the notebook first. The pages were covered in Adrian's handwriting. Not neat like his emails, but real, rushed, sharp in places, personal, dates, names, meetings. One page in particular stood out. EB, third warning, not verbal. Silent undermining. June. Refused direct approval on Budapest. Cross-referenced CW present. Lily stared at the initials. EB Ethan Blackwood, and next to his, scrawled in smaller writing, CW Catherine Wren. Her chest tightened. She'd known something was wrong. She'd felt it. But this was more than rivalry or ambition. This was preparation. Adrian had been watching his own blood, documenting, quietly building a record of betrayal. And somehow, she was part of it now. She returned to the hospital just after 6, flash drives locked in her purse, the notebook buried beneath the lining, the velvet box she hadn't dared open yet. Adrian was awake, sitting up, sipping ginger ale from a plastic straw like it was aged scotch. He looked better, not strong, not ready for war, but better. He smiled faintly when he saw her. "You took my car. You told them to give me the keys. I was testing your memory." She pulled the chair closer to his bed. "Then you'll be pleased to know your memory box is intact." He raised an eyebrow. "You found it?" "I did more than that. I read the notebook." Adrian leaned his head back against the pillow, eyes closed. "Then you know. I know enough." They were quiet for a moment, letting that settle. Then Lily added, "You've been documenting Ethan for over a year." His eyes opened again. "I didn't want to believe it, but every time I gave him room to prove me wrong, he took something else." "And Catherine?" Adrian's jaw tightened. She came back when he needed her to, just like before, charming the board. Whispering doubts, "She's a storm dressed like a summer breeze." Lily smiled, though her heart felt heavy. "That sounds like the way people used to describe you." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second, the weight behind his eyes dropped. "I haven't been that man for a long time," he said quietly. "Not since I met you." She wanted to look away, but she didn't. Because if she looked away, she might miss the moment where truth slid past fear, and she was so tired of missing moments. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the key, and held it out to him. "I don't want to hold this if I'm not sure what it unlocks." He took it slowly. Turned it in his fingers. "It opens the place no one talks about." "Adrian?" "The real ledger, physical copy, every wire transfer, every donation, every shareholder agreement. It's in a storage unit in Chelsea, under my mother's maiden name." She sat back, stunned. "Why would you hide that?" "Because," he said, "the truth is too expensive for most people to carry." Later that night, Lily stayed with him again. The nurse insisted he try a light meal, hospital chicken, steamed vegetables, and plain rice. It looked like sadness on a plate. Lily had brought 2 turkey sandwiches from the deli down the street, along with a bottle of ginger beer and a slice of peach pie in a paper bag. She didn't ask if he wanted it. She just unwrapped his and handed it to him. He took one bite and groaned softly. "You remembered the dill." She smiled. "You said once that turkey without dill was a waste of chewing." "That sounds like me." They sat in a companionable silence, chewing slowly, letting the hospital room fade around them. The world felt smaller, safer in that moment, until Lily asked, "Do you still trust me?" He looked up, startled. "I mean it," she said. "You've handed me keys, letters, evidence." "Why me, Adrian?" His gaze didn't leave hers. "Because when I fall, you're the only one who doesn't look surprised." Lily blinked, once, twice, and then gently she placed the velvet box on his lap. "I didn't open it," she said, "but if you want me to know what's inside, you'll tell me." Adrian looked down at it. His fingers hesitated. And just as he began to lift the lid, a knock came at the door. Lily turned, expecting the nurse. It wasn't. It was Ethan, holding a briefcase and wearing the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ethan Blackwood stood in the doorway like someone who had been invited or had simply stopped waiting for permission. Lily felt Adrian go still beside her. His hand was still on the velvet box. He didn't move it, didn't open it, didn't hide it. He just looked at his brother with something unreadable in his face. "Evening," Ethan said smoothly, as if he'd walked into a dinner party, not a hospital room with a heart monitor. "Didn't realize visiting hours extended to rivals," Adrian replied. Voice calm but sharper than usual. Ethan smiled. "I thought I'd check on you. I heard you were conscious again. Impressive, really. You always did have that dramatic timing." Lily didn't speak. She sat straighter, but kept her hands folded on her lap. She knew better than to step into the middle of two lions pretending to be gentlemen. Ethan walked further into the room, placing the leather briefcase gently on the foot of the bed. "I brought some paperwork. Thought you might want to stay ahead of things." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Which things?" "Oh, the usual." Ethan opened the case slowly. Board updates, legal drafts, some concerns about public relations. Apparently, someone whispered that you collapsed in the middle of a hostile takeover attempt. "Interesting whisper," Adrian said. "Sounds like someone rehearsed it." Ethan chuckled, light and cold. "You know how people talk, and how fast the walls shift when the throne's empty for even 5 minutes." Lily glanced at Adrian. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture had. He was bracing himself, not for a fight, for a performance. "You know," Ethan went on, flipping a document onto the bed, "when we were kids, I always envied the way you made people follow you, even when you didn't ask them to. It was like watching a storm gather just because you looked at the sky." Adrian didn't respond. "Not at first, then. And I always envied the way you could make people feel like they owed you something when they didn't." Ethan's eyes flicked toward Lily, then back to his brother. "Do you really think she's ready for what you're handing her?" Lily met his gaze this time, calm, unflinching. "I don't think he's handing me anything," she said. "I think he's finally not hiding it." Ethan smiled, slow and dangerous. "You're loyal. I'll give you that. But loyalty is funny, Lily. Sometimes it rots from the inside without anyone noticing. One day you're standing next to a man you trust. The next, you're holding the knife someone else put in his back." Adrian's jaw flexed. "Are you done?" Ethan closed the briefcase. "Not quite. I have one more document for you." He pulled out a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. This came across Legal's desk this morning, an anonymized tip. The same style, the same source, internal tampering, fraud allegations. Adrian's eyes darkened. "Against who?" "Against you." The air in the room shifted. Lily leaned forward. "You're serious?" "Oh, very," Ethan said, like it amused him. "It claims you altered financial reports going back 6 quarters, that you funneled shareholder funds into shell charities, that you faked a medical emergency to delay discovery." Adrian barked a quiet laugh. "Convenient timing." "It's all very convenient," Ethan agreed, "which is why the board is discussing whether to initiate an internal audit. I figured I'd give you a heads up, brother to brother." "Very thoughtful of you," Adrian said, voice flat. Ethan turned toward the door. "One last thing," he paused. "If you have any personal items you'd like retrieved from the 42nd floor, I suggest you let me know. Security has been instructed to archive." And with that, he left. The silence after he closed the door was thick. Lily exhaled slowly. "He's trying to replace you." "No," Adrian murmured, staring at the unopened document. "He already thinks he has." Lily stood, paced the length of the small hospital room once, then turned back. "The anonymous tip. He wants to see how you'll react, if you panic." "I won't," Adrian said, "but someone else might." He reached for the velvet box again but didn't open it. Instead, he passed it to her. Her fingers closed around it carefully. "I don't want to look unless I'm supposed to," she said quietly. "I want you to hold it," Adrian replied, "because what's inside, I didn't keep it locked away out of secrecy. I kept it locked because it hurt." Her brows drew together. "Is it about Catherine?" "No," he said. "It's about my mother." That stopped her. "I thought she passed when I was 16, but she left behind something I wasn't supposed to find until I became a man with something to lose." Her words, not mine. Lily looked down at the box in her hands. "And do you think you're that man now?" Adrian's voice was quiet. "I think I've been that man for a while. I just didn't know what I had to lose until I almost lost it." She didn't ask what it was. She knew. It was late by the time Lily stepped out of the hospital into the warm night air. The storm had passed, but puddles clung to the sidewalks and steam rose from the grates. The city felt softer somehow, like it had listened. She walked a few blocks before she stopped in front of a small corner cafe. The lights were still on. A sleepy-eyed barista waved her in. She ordered a chamomile tea and sat by the window. From her coat pocket, she pulled out the velvet box and set it on the table. She didn't open it, not yet. But she did pull out her phone. She typed out a message to Adrian. "If I read what's inside, there's no going back, is there?" He replied almost immediately. "No, but maybe you've never been the kind of woman who wanted to go back." She stared at the screen, her fingers hovering. Then her eyes drifted up to the sidewalk outside, and her entire body tensed. Across the street, under the glow of a street lamp, stood Catherine, not moving, just watching. The moment their eyes met through the glass, Lily felt something ancient stir, not fear, not anger, but recognition. Catherine stood still beneath the street lamp. Her trench coat fluttered slightly with the breeze. A purse hung from one shoulder like an accessory she didn't need but knew how to weaponize. She wasn't blinking. She was waiting. Lily stood slowly, sliding her phone into her coat pocket. She hesitated for only a breath before picking up the velvet box and placing it in her bag. Just out of sight. She stepped outside. The city air was damp but calming, and the cafe bell jingled faintly behind her. Across the street, Catherine didn't move. Lily walked to her. It felt strange, how quiet the block was, like the world had hit pause to listen. "Long night?" Catherine said, her voice soft. Laced with that same smile Lily remembered from every elevator ride she wished had ended sooner. "Long enough to spot someone watching me through a cafe window," Lily replied calmly. Catherine laughed, a short, polished sound. "Oh, sweetheart, if I wanted to hide, I would have." Lily crossed her arms. "Then let's not pretend this is a coincidence." "No, let's not." Catherine shifted slightly. "You know, there's a lot of talk going around about you, about Adrian, about what's going on behind those closed hospital doors." Lily didn't answer. Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly. "Funny thing is, I always thought you were harmless. Quiet, polite, grateful, someone who stays in their lane." Lily tilted her head. "And now?" "Well," Catherine smiled, "now you're walking around with keys you didn't earn and secrets you shouldn't be trusted with." There it was, the truth beneath the polish. Lily didn't flinch. "Adrian trusts me," she said. Simply. Catherine's smile widened, but her eyes turned cold. "Adrian's always had a weakness for women who make him feel seen. It doesn't mean you're special. It means he's lonely." That one cut deeper than Lily expected, but she took a breath and held her ground. "Maybe, but I'm not the one who came back the moment the crown slipped." Silence stretched between them for a moment, taut like a wire. Then Catherine stepped forward, lowering her voice. "You think you've won something, Lily, but this isn't a love story. It's a war, and Adrian's heart? That was the first casualty a long time ago." Lily studied her, slowly realizing something beneath the words. "You still love him," she said. More softly than she intended. Catherine blinked, just once, and the spell cracked for a fraction of a second. Then, just as quickly, she stepped back. "He used to be brilliant," she said. "Now he's handing you boxes and notebooks like a man who knows he's losing. With that, she turned and walked away. Not fast, not flustered, but not in control either. Back in her apartment, Lily poured herself a glass of water and sat down at the kitchen table, lit only by the low lamp above the sink. The box sat in front of her. She stared at it for a long time. She could still hear Catherine's voice in her head. This isn't a love story. It's a war. Maybe both could be true. She opened the box. Inside was a folded slip of linen, cream-colored with slightly frayed edges. Not jewelry, not money, not a lockbox code. She unfolded the linen to find a photo tucked inside. Adrian, 16, maybe 17. Lean, sharper featured, awkward in a tailored jacket that didn't quite fit. And beside him, a woman, elegant, warm, holding his hand, his mother. On the back of the photo, in careful handwriting, if he forgets who he is, remind him. A real legacy isn't about power. It's about love that doesn't vanish when you're gone. A.R.B. Lily swallowed. She stared at the photo longer than she meant to, then noticed something else beneath the linen, a folded letter, yellowed slightly with age. She opened it slowly, cautiously. It wasn't long. My son, one day they will ask you to choose between what you can take and what you can give. I hope you choose the latter, even if it breaks your heart, because love isn't power, it's what keeps power from becoming poison. And if you forget who you are, if they pull you too far from yourself, look for the one who's still standing when the rest have left. She will know how to bring you home. Mom Lily read it twice. Then again. She pressed the letter to her chest, as if her heart might somehow absorb the truth of it, not just for Adrian, but for herself. And it was in that moment that something clicked into place. Not just trust, not just loyalty, but why he had chosen her, not for her discretion, not even for her heart, but because she was the one who stayed. And maybe, just maybe, she was the one who could bring him back if this all fell apart. The next morning, Lily returned to the hospital earlier than usual. She expected to find Adrian asleep, but he was already dressed, seated in the chair by the window. Staring out at the skyline with a cup of black coffee in his hands, he looked at her, just once, and then said without turning back, "They're voting today." "On your removal?" He nodded. "Ethan thinks he has the numbers, and if Catherine gets the finance committee on board..." "What happens if you lose?" Adrian turned back to her. His expression wasn't afraid, it was resolved. "I lose everything." Lily walked to him, took the photo from her purse, and placed it on his lap. "You forgot who you are," she said quietly. "So I'm here to remind you." His eyes dropped to the photo, and his hands, steady all morning, finally trembled. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, his phone lit up on the table beside them. A message. From the same anonymized sender as before. Same wording. Someone inside compliance. "Check the boardroom camera feed from yesterday morning, 7:53 a.m. Adrian looked at the screen, then at Lily, and without saying a word, he stood, his legs still weak, but moving, because whoever sent that message had seen everything. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed holding his phone tight, eyes scanning the login portal for the internal surveillance system. His expression was hard again, not angry but locked, like someone who'd been bracing for this moment long before it came. Lily stood behind him, one hand on the back of the chair, watching the screen with quiet tension. "Do you know who could have sent it?" she asked. "No." His voice was low. "But someone had access. The boardroom camera feed isn't something just anyone stumbles across. You need a code and a reason." Adrian opened the company security app, authenticated, and entered the override PIN and a rotating one-time code. The feed loaded, a time-stamped reel of security footage, no sound, just time, date, and a wide-angle view of the conference room from the top corner of the ceiling. The feed loaded, a time-stamped reel of security footage, no sound, just time, date, and a wide-angle view of the conference room from the top corner of the ceiling. Adrian fast-forwarded. 7:51 a.m. Empty room. The cleaning staff had just finished, one paper left skewed at a chair, a single bottle of water on the table. 7:52 a.m. Catherine entered. Not Ethan. Catherine. She was dressed for power. Navy suit. Heels. Hair swept back in that immaculate twist she wore like a weapon. She walked slowly to Adrian's seat at the head of the table. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a phone. Adrian leaned forward, pausing the video. "That's my phone," he said. Lily's breath caught. "You left it in the room?" "No, it was in my coat pocket. But I had the flu last week. I switched coats. This one didn't have the extra button on the sleeve. She must have known that." They watched as Catherine placed the phone on the table, opened it, and began navigating through his apps. Her face was calm, practiced, no hesitation. At 7:53 a.m., she unlocked Adrian's phone with the passcode she'd learned long ago and opened the company calendar. She added the Singapore meeting and confirmed it from his account. Then she placed the phone back into his coat pocket, smoothed his chair, and left the room without a single glance at the camera. Lily didn't speak, not yet. He slowly exhaled and then said she wanted the collapse to happen with witnesses, with optics. Because if you'd fallen at home, no one would have believed the worst. He nodded once. "But if you fall in front of the board," Lily murmured, "you look unfit to lead." "And if the meeting was scheduled under my name," he added, "then I created the trap myself." They stared at the screen for another long moment. Then Adrian set the phone down and rubbed his face with both hands. "She played it perfectly," he said, "and I didn't see it coming." Lily stepped around and sat beside him. "You trusted her at one point?" "I did." His voice dropped. "And I was wrong." He turned to her, then finally looking up, not as the CEO, but as the man behind the mask, the one who had trusted too easily in the wrong places and not enough in the right ones. "You only smile like that," he said softly. "When you've been lied to." She tilted her head. "I wasn't smiling." "Exactly." Later that afternoon, Lily found herself standing in the elevator at Blackwood & Co., flanked by silence and glass. It had only been 24 hours since the collapse, but the whole building felt like it had aged. She carried with her a flash drive. The footage. Adrian had told her, "If I walk in with that video, they'll find a way to spin it. But if you walk in, if you give it to the right person, it won't be noise. It'll be truth." Lily had nodded. She hadn't argued. She didn't need power, but she knew how to carry truth. The elevator opened onto the 42nd floor. The top floor, the one where only voices that mattered were heard. She stepped out and was met almost instantly by Greg, who looked like he hadn't slept. "They're all in," he said. "Closed vote. Ethan's in the chair." "Did he see me arrive?" "I made sure he didn't." Lily nodded. "And Catherine?" Greg's mouth twisted. Holding court like she never left. Lily handed him a second copy of the flash drive. "If I don't come back out with this handled, you send that to external counsel and, if needed, regulators." Greg paled. "Lily, I'm serious, but wait at least an hour." He looked at her for a long beat. "You really think this is going to work?" She smiled faintly. "It's not about working. It's about being seen." The boardroom was quiet when she entered. 9 members. Ethan at the head, speaking smoothly. Catherine beside him. Coffee steaming in her pristine porcelain cup, they both turned when they saw Lily. But only Catherine smiled. "Miss Parker," Ethan said. Standing slowly, "We weren't expecting you." Lily held her ground. "No, I don't imagine you were." Catherine's smile didn't falter. "We're in the middle of something. Is there a reason?" Lily placed the flash drive on the center of the table. "In the interest of transparency," she said, "I thought the board might want to see what actually happened before they take a vote. based on a meeting that was never supposed to exist. A few members exchanged glances. Catherine's hand curled just slightly around her coffee cup. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly are we supposed to find on that drive?" "The truth," Lily said, "caught on your own cameras by your own security system." She turned to the members, her voice steady. "Mr. Blackwood didn't collapse because he was negligent or hiding something. He collapsed because he's exhausted from carrying a company that's slowly being carved out from under him by people who say they care about legacy." She looked at Ethan. "Legacy doesn't come from betrayal." She looked at Catherine. "And it definitely doesn't come from ambition dressed as loyalty." Silence fell like a stone. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. Once. He looked at it, and for the first time since she'd met him, his smile faded. For a moment, no one spoke. The boardroom, known for its decisive voices and sharp turns, was pinned under silence as Ethan Blackwood stared at the message on his phone. His thumb hovered, frozen mid-scroll. Catherine leaned in slightly, trying to glimpse the screen, but Ethan turned it away, jaw locking just for a second. It was the smallest shift, but Lily saw it, and so did 3 members of the board. She didn't need to see the message to know what it said. The footage had been confirmed. Someone, maybe security, maybe legal, had already verified the time-stamped video. The board now knew. Adrian hadn't scheduled the meeting. The collapse hadn't happened during a legitimate session. He'd been set up. And now it was clear by who. "I believe," Lily said, her voice calm but unwavering, "you all have a decision to make, not just about who leads this company, but about the kind of people you're willing to follow." Her hands were clasped in front of her, steady. Inside, her pulse pounded. Catherine stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. That footage doesn't prove anything beyond an administrative misstep." "It proves deliberate manipulation," one of the board members interrupted. An older woman with silver-streaked hair and the kind of stillness that made everyone else hold their breath. Lily didn't know her well, just that her name was Mrs. DeWitt, and that she'd been one of the first investors back when the company was just a whisper of a family firm. Her voice was firm now. "And it proves intent." Another board member, Mr. Sims, glanced at Ethan. "Do you deny knowledge of this?" Ethan stood too. Slowly, but the charm had drained from his face. "I had no part in the meeting change," he said carefully, "nor in any attempt to discredit my brother. But perhaps we all should have been paying more attention to how personal dynamics were seeping into professional spaces." A deflection. Subtle, calculated. Lily met his eyes. "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let them see you bleed, Ethan, because hiding the wound doesn't stop the rot." The room went still again. Then one of the lawyers near the door cleared his throat. "I suggest we call a recess before continuing the vote." Mrs. DeWitt nodded. 30 minutes, then we reconvene." As people stood and murmurs swelled, Lily turned to leave, her heart still hammering, but her steps slow, not retreating. Just breathing. Adrian was standing when she returned to the hospital room. He had changed into his suit, the same one he'd worn when he collapsed. Crisp charcoal gray, freshly pressed, polished shoes. He looked like himself again, but more than that. He looked like someone who had decided not to let anyone write his ending. "You shouldn't be out of bed," Lily said, almost a whisper. "I shouldn't have been in it," he replied, straightening his tie. She smiled faintly. "The boardroom?" She didn't need to say more. He nodded once. "I watched the feed twice, then again. And I felt sick." He paused. "Not from what she did, but from how long I kept pretending it was something else." She stepped closer. "You weren't pretending. You were hoping." He looked at her then. "Fully. I don't have that luxury anymore." She hesitated. "Do you want me to go back with you?" "No." He stepped forward. "I want you to walk in beside me." The elevator ride up to the 42nd floor was quiet. Lily's fingers brushed against his as the doors closed. He didn't pull away. She didn't look up. But she felt it, the tension that had defined them for so long, finally softening into something else. Something not quite spoken. When they stepped into the hallway, Greg was already waiting. He raised an eyebrow at Adrian, clearly stunned. "Sir? I mean, Mr. Blackwood. Adrian's fine." Greg blinked. "You look like I'm done waiting," Adrian said. They walked together toward the boardroom. Lily could feel the eyes on them as they passed, whispers trailing in their wake. Every assistant, every executive who had once believed Ethan's charm now watched Adrian walk tall again, inside the boardroom. Everyone turned to look. Adrian stopped at the head of the table. The chair was empty. He didn't sit. He looked at Catherine first, then Ethan, and finally at the rest of them. "I'm not going to spend the next 10 minutes defending who I am," he said, voice steady, "because if you still don't know what I stand for, you haven't been paying attention." He turned to Lily. "For a long time, I believed legacy was something you built in silence. That dignity meant never letting them see your pain." He looked back at the table. "But maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's not weakness to let people see what it costs to hold the line." No one spoke. He walked to the corner, picked up the flash drive Lily had left. "I have nothing to hide," he said. "But the question is, do all of you?" He placed the drive back on the table. Mrs. DeWitt was the first to speak. "I move that the board formally dismiss the motion to remove Mr. Blackwood as CEO." "I second it," said Sims, already nodding. Ethan didn't speak. Catherine's hands curled tightly around her chair. "All in favor?" Mrs. DeWitt asked. One by one, hands rose. Lily watched as Ethan stayed still, and Catherine's reluctantly lifted, too late to matter. Mrs. DeWitt turned to Adrian. "The floor is yours again, Mr. Blackwood." He nodded. "Thank you." And then he sat, the weight of months, maybe years, finally letting itself settle across his shoulders. Lily sat beside him, close, quiet. But before she could say a word, a text buzzed on her phone. "Blocked number. Check your email. Someone else is still playing the long game." The city's skyline looked softer at night, not quieter, but gentler, less like a battlefield, more like a secret. Lily sat on the wide windowsill in Adrian's penthouse, legs tucked beneath her, a glass of wine resting in her hand. The room behind her was mostly dark, save for the glow from the kitchen where Adrian moved quietly, barefoot, sleeves rolled. He was making tea, of all things. Not coffee, not whiskey. Tea. She turned slightly, watching as he carefully poured the water into 2 mugs, added a slice of lemon to hers. How did he still remember that? And walked over. He handed it to her without a word and sat beside her, their knees barely touching. He looked out the window as if the world would offer him answers he hadn't dared ask. They hadn't spoken much since leaving the boardroom. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full. Full of things they hadn't said. Of all the moments they had shared, this one felt the most fragile. Not because anything was breaking, but because something was finally being unwrapped. Lily took a slow sip of her tea. "You always said you hated the view from up here," Adrian murmured. She gave a soft laugh. "I never said that. You didn't have to." He glanced at her. "You'd stand by the window, arms crossed, always looking down instead of out." "I wasn't looking down," she said. "I was grounding myself." He studied her. "Why?" "Because the higher you are," she said, "the easier it is to forget how far you can fall." He nodded once, quiet, then, "I missed you." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't calculated. Just the truth. Lily didn't look at him right away. She let the words settle in the air between them, warm and vulnerable. Like a hand reaching across a river that had always felt too wide. "I missed you too," she said softly. "But I was angry," she added. "I know. You shut me out." "I did. You made me feel like I was just another person in your shadow." "I know," he said again, voice lower now. "And it wasn't because you weren't important. It was because you were the only thing I didn't know how to protect. She turned toward him now fully. Adrian, she whispered, tell me the truth before it hurts more to guess. He looked at her, really looked at her, the way he used to when he thought she wasn't watching, and for once, he didn't look away. You were the only part of my life that wasn't transactional. That didn't feel like strategy. You made me laugh. You brought me coffee with notes on the sleeve. You kept my ego in check and my calendar in order. I loved working with you, he shook his head. It wasn't just that. I didn't want to need you. I didn't want you tied to my name the way everyone else was. But somewhere between boardrooms and elevator rides, you became the one thing I looked for when everything else stopped making sense. He paused. And then I got scared. Because once you realize something matters, you start expecting to lose it. Lily didn't answer with words. She set her tea down and reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. I was never going to leave, she said. You pushed me away because you thought I would. He squeezed her hand gently. I believed too many lies about myself. Well, she whispered, I'm not here to fix you. I know, but I'm here to see you, she said. The way your mother did. The way you tried not to let anyone else. He closed his eyes for a moment, like he needed to breathe that in. And when he opened them, she saw it. The wall. Finally down. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. I'm so tired of pretending I don't feel anything. You don't have to pretend with me. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild or breathless. It was slow, honest. The kind of kiss that doesn't demand anything. It just says, I'm here. I see you. I stayed. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. There wasn't anything to add. It was already enough. For now. Later, after they'd moved from the window to the couch, curled beneath a soft throw blanket, Lily finally remembered the message. She pulled out her phone. Blocked number. One unread email. She opened it. The subject line read, The one you forgot. Attached was a single image. Her breath hitched. It was a grainy still from security footage. The timestamp was 2 weeks earlier. In the image, someone was walking out of Adrian's private office. Not Ethan, not Catherine. It was someone Lily had trusted. Someone who had always smiled at her like he didn't know anything. Greg. And in his hand, Adrian's master keycard. Lily didn't sleep that night. She lay in Adrian's guest room, too restless to close her eyes, too numb to cry. The image wouldn't leave her mind. Greg walking out of Adrian's office, the master keycard in hand, the time stamp, the way his smile had always felt a little too perfect, too constant. How she'd never questioned it. Because Greg was kind. Greg brought her donuts. Greg covered her shifts. Greg joked about floor politics and always offered her the better half of his sandwich. But Greg had also had access, and now Greg had betrayed them both. At 3:17 a.m., she sat up. By 4:00, she was back at the office, alone, the hallway lights flickering on automatically as she walked past. Adrian had given her clearance to investigate quietly. No alarms. No accusations. Yet. She pulled up Greg's internal access logs on her terminal. There it was. Not just once. 3 times in the last month, Greg had entered Adrian's office alone. Once the morning of the collapse. Once 4 days before that. Once just after the Zurich files had been updated. And each time under Lily's login credentials. He hadn't just gone rogue. He'd gone through her. By 7 a.m., she printed everything she needed, slid it into a manila folder, and walked toward the only office that still scared her a little, the one Ethan Blackwood now occupied. He looked up when she entered, a flicker of surprise betraying his usual calm. I was told you'd gone home. I did. She placed the folder on his desk. He looked at it, then back at her. What's this? Proof, she said, not just of Catherine, but of Greg, your Greg. He opened the file slowly, flipping through the documents. Keycard entries, timestamp overlays, matching logs, and a printout of the still image. His brow furrowed. Why would he? You tell me, Lily said. He was close to you. You trusted him. He had access to everything, including you. Ethan stared at the image. He never said a word. Because betrayal never knocks, Ethan. It slips in through the back door. The one you forget to lock because you think you're safe. He looked up at her, and for the first time, she didn't see power in his expression. She saw regret. You could have leaked this, he said. I could have, Lily replied, but this isn't just about cleaning house. It's about rebuilding something better than what you tried to steal. He didn't argue. He just nodded. She turned to leave, but just before she reached the door, he said quietly, You were never just the secretary. She looked back at him. No, she said, I was the only one watching. Later that morning, Adrian returned to the 42nd floor, not escorted, not guarded, but welcomed. The board gathered not for votes or hearings, but for a quiet declaration. Adrian Blackwood was not stepping down. Catherine resigned, publicly, with polished teeth and gritted grace. She claimed she needed a break from corporate intensity. No one believed it. But everyone applauded. Greg never returned. By noon, legal was involved. Security had changed protocols. Lily's access was reset, upgraded. Not as an assistant, not anymore. She didn't sit outside Adrian's office now. She sat beside it, in her own. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Lily found Adrian on the balcony of the 38th floor. He was leaning against the railing, his tie loosened, his jacket over the chair behind him. He looked up at her. There was a peace in his eyes she hadn't seen before. You came, he said. I never left. She stepped beside him, resting her arms on the railing. Ethan agreed to a formal restructuring, Adrian said. He's staying on, but not above me. And Greg? Blacklisted. Quietly. No press? Lily nodded. It's the right call. They stood in silence for a moment. Then he turned to her fully. Do you remember, he asked, the first day you came to work for me? She laughed. You didn't look up once. I did, he admitted, but only when you weren't looking. You had a green notepad with daisies on it. And you asked me to throw it away. Because it was too cheerful, he quoted himself. Grinning, she smiled. I kept it anyway. He moved a little closer. I know. And then more serious. I know I don't get to ask for another chance. Not after all the ways I shut you out. You don't have to ask, Lily said. I don't? No, she whispered. You've already done the one thing I was waiting for. What's that? You let me stay. He leaned in, brushing her cheek with the back of his fingers. You're the only one who ever did. As night fully claimed the city, Adrian and Lily sat side by side on the balcony, sharing the last bite of peach pie from a cafe box she'd saved. One fork, no rush. The world below kept moving, but for once they didn't have to. Everything that needed to be said had already lived in their silences. What remained now was simple. Two people, a second chance, and a life built not on secrets or power, but on something far more rare. Trust. Now, tell me, would you forgive someone who finally told you the truth? If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, or subscribe for more stories that stay with you, even after they end. And rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments. I'd love to know how it made you feel. You matter. Your voice matters. And your presence here means more than you know. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.